Ladies and gentlemen, on a special night on Election Tuesday night, welcome to Amsterdam Talk, episode 30, season 4. I'm your host, Rod, as usual. Tonight is a special night because there's actually an election going on while we are doing this. And to keep us in the election spirit, I actually went and got a guy that worked, the last four administrations, if I read correctly, view from a black Fed. So before we get started, Mr. Dedrick Gilliard, tell us about welcome.
Well, good to be here, Rod. Yeah, the last five administrations, as a matter of fact, started with Clinton in '98 through the first 2 years of Biden in 2022. Derek Gilliard, good to be here. And yes, there was nothing like those 4 years.
Oh man, But before we even get started, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, sure. So I was born in Atlanta. Both my parents were military. So, like, I was 3, 4 years old on the boat to Germany, and military parents lived all over. A lot of times in Kansas and Texas, back and forth a couple times in Atlanta, four different high schools in three different states. And actually, I was really excited about getting out of the South because I tended to think that all this craziness, the racism, the Jim
Mm-hmm.
Crow was all just a Southern phenomenon. To later find out that wasn't true. But yeah, went to school out in the Midwest, studied journalism, worked out there for a minute, and then came back to Atlanta as my mother got sick. Did a lot of things. I was with USA Today their first 10 years. Wrote for Time Magazine a bit. Um, the Atlanta Daily World, spent time at a couple of HBCUs, Clark College here in Atlanta, Fort Valley State. And then I found my why in life in 1994 when I went to work for Dr. King's organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And that was really an amazing time where I really got deep into justice work, dealing with all kind of things like redistricting, educational tracking. Why did all the black kids get directed to vocational tracks in schools instead of engineering and science and STEM? All these things around hate crimes and just, of course, voter education and all of those kind of things. And then my oldest son at 17 all of a sudden started having seizures, and we couldn't figure out why because we knew he wasn't taking drugs and everything. And then when my mentor, Dr. Joseph Lowry, who was the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, he co-founded it with Fred Shuttlesworth, Ralph Abernathy, Dr. King, and several other ministers. And you may remember him when Obama uh, was at his first inauguration. At the very end, they brought him out in a wheelchair, and he did the benediction.
Okay.
And but he was retiring, and so I needed to go do something where I could get some insurance because they insured me, but not the family. You know, women and kids always need some insurance, and got hired by a white liberal nurse that was over the Atlanta region where we served the eight southeastern states: Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And she said her office needed to better reflect the region that we served. And you think about all these states where, number one, you got all these conservative governors that won't expand Medicaid, and you have all these health disparities from stroke, heart attack, diabetes, all these kind of things. And you have a lot of poverty, a lot of illiteracy, and the deepest vestiges of racism and Jim Crow. So I
Right.
went to work there, and again, that was at the end of Clinton, and I always worked for the presidential appointee. So everything we did was political or framed in politics, and to be able to kind of go from administration to administration was not an easy thing, but you know, you kind of figured it out. But there was nothing like those 4 years. And so something told me, you know, in my spirit, I needed to be documenting that. And
Right.
that's kind of how we are here where we are now.
Correct. So you had a few, just to name a few publications. You were the author of Living in the Shadows, Unsung Heroes and Sheroes Who Marched with Dr. King, Dr. King Jr. But we want to talk about, why did you entitle the book The Longest 4 Years of My Life?
So most of the people that I worked for, even if they were Republicans, Republicans, Democrats, I disagreed with some of everybody's administration, and I think something's wrong. Excuse me. If anybody likes everything that any leader does,
Right.
and that's how I was there, but there were several things that was so different about that administration. He didn't even trust the people that he hired. Like, for example, you're in North Carolina. My first regional director under Donald Trump was a congresswoman named Renee Elmer. She's from North Carolina. In fact, she was, so there are 10 regions across the country,
Right.
and Chicago, Philly, LA, San Francisco. And so he hired her. In fact, she was a good friend of the secretary, and they brought her in, and she was an ardent anti Affordable Care Act, a really a vicious anti Obamacare attack dog. But then she was the only woman of the 10. Every other administration, at least half of the regional directors were women. So she didn't stay long because she said the men, they didn't respect her, wouldn't listen to her, kept shutting her off. And so she left. So that's the kind of administration it was. In fact, her big thing was telehealth. And this was just before COVID. So
Mm-hmm.
you see, telehealth became such an instrumental part of us being able to serve, particularly the elderly and the vulnerable who couldn't come in and be around everybody else and get sick and catch COVID. And so, but they wouldn't listen to her, and we could have probably saved, thousands and thousands of lives had they done that. But to me, his administration was so divisive. What he talked about, Latinos are rapists and immigrants are rapists and thieves. The China virus. He kept talking about black run cities, and he wanted our country to bring in more immigrants from Scandinavia. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
white people. And so every day it was something else that was divisive. And that made this the longest 4 years of my life. I got to the point where, Gerard, and I'm usually a late night person. I'm normally, 'cause I'm either up writing or whatever to two
Mm-hmm.
o'clock in the morning, and then but subconsciously, I'd start groping for my phone on my nightstand about 4:30, 5 o'clock, because I'd have to pull it and look and see what did he say on Twitter
Mm-hmm.
overnight that I was gonna have to respond to and
Right.
react to the next morning, and so it was rough.
Right.
And
Oh,
then
well, this
his mischaracterization. Uh
I
huh.
don't cut you off, but just to let
Yeah.
the viewers know, this is a live look at CNN right now
Yeah.
that we have up right now as well. Okay. All right, Derek, there you go.
Yeah, yeah, no, so just all of that, and like his mischaracterization of the justice marches, to make it be about the flag and the national anthem as opposed to over policing of black men, which
Right.
we know it was about. What he say about the athletes? He told Jerry Jones, the Dallas Cowboys, anybody who wanted to protest, fire those sons of, I guess I can
Right.
say it, sons
You
of
can
bitches.
cuss. You
So
can cuss. You can
yeah,
cuss.
so it was, and so we happen to have the only all black office of the 10 in the country. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
four of us, but so we're seeing, and we need to do something about uh our immigration policy. There's no question about it. But we're seeing bodies wash up because, people who've walked 1,000 miles, and it's not that they're coming over here to grift, and, because you got bad people. Hell, if we wanted to talk every day about what Native Americans did that's scandalous, we
Right.
could, but most of these people are fleeing either crime or poverty, and they're just looking for a better way of life. And so the way he treated them and looked at them was, to us, it was inhumane. We could see our black kids in the kids that were being separated from their parents at the
Or being
border and
detained.
sleeping under those, yeah, those whatever they call those blankets that
Hmm.
they had. In our one of our responsibilities, Rod, was to call around to these various communities and try to find some that would be receptive for hosting one of these unaccompanied children centers. Of course, they get paid by the government, but they set them up and they care for them. And that was the HHS responsibility, wasn't to separate them, but it was to care for them that were separated. And over 3,000 of them were never reunited with their families.
Correct.
So that was kind of heartbreaking for us because we remembered slavery and all the things
Hmm.
that happened to our people that was way too similar to that.
Correct. So you said in the beginning of the conversation you don't agree with everybody. So the five, administrations you worked for, you said no, I don't agree with them. So it was something. Can you name one thing out of those? Well, you just did Trump, so you have to do him. Out of the Clintons, the Bush, well, Bush Jr., Obama, and I'm thinking I'm missing somebody. Am I? Oh,
Um,
and
Biden,
Biden.
yeah.
Biden.
So I will say this in all honesty. I was kind of figuring out which way was up with the Clinton because I was only there for 2 years. But
Okay.
one impactful thing, I think, because of, what happened with him in his with Monica Lewinsky, and I'm
Right.
not saying trying to make that, but it kind of redefined what sex was. So that was a very kind of interesting thing there. Now, Bush did some good things. If I could say something good that he did too. I mean, of course, Katrina, I think that was certainly mismanaged, and a
Hmm.
lot of it is who you have working for you. And of course, there were no nuclear weapons in Iraq, and we went in there, and that was jacked up. But I'll say a couple good things that he did, particularly for our communities, like. He had something called Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. That came as part of the Administration for Children and Families. And particularly for some minority communities and at risk communities, because our people are incarcerated or they may have been strung out, the onus of raising those kids falls on the grandparents. So he provided a real support network for that. The other thing he had was something called a Healthy Marriage Initiative. And again, sometimes in some of our inner cities, we haven't really seen what a healthy marriage looks like. So that was a couple of things that I thought he did well. In addition to it was his compassionate capitalism thing. Now, President Obama,
Somebody
um,
just put up PEPFAR, the emergency plan for AIDS relief. I'm believing
okay, okay.
that was under Bush,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
believe.
yeah.
U.S. President's emergency plan for AIDS relief, PEPFAR. Oh,
They did I think they did some good things in Africa also around kind of fighting AIDS. So some of them did some of that. The Obama administration, it's kind of hard to be critical just because um, you know, my brother-in-law likes to say this: they got the country in the worst shape it could be, and then you hand it to a black man to fix it. But I think he was super cautious, probably because he felt the weight of the legacy of being the first black person. So, he was squeaky clean. But I thought that in the very beginning, after one of the things I'm really proud of is us standing up and implementing the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. And
hmm.
it was designed so that every state would expand Medicaid. Now, of course, you had these recalcitrant governors who wouldn't do it. And the reason was there's this guy, a congressman out of South Carolina, called Joe Wilson. And he's the one that stood up during Obama's address and shouted, "You lie," which
Hmm.
they would have never done with any other president. And then later he said it's the politically correct thing to be against the black man in the White House. So, what Mitch McConnell said, his goal was to make Obama a one term president. So
Right.
they were adamantly against him. So I think that he was really, really cautious in the beginning because I give you an example. When we stood up the ACA, the very day the Affordable Care Act opened and the health insurance marketplace opened, where people could go on and sign up for Obamacare, that very
Mhm.
day is the day that Congress uh, went on strike, or Congress had the federal shutdown.
Get shut down.
So we still had to work, but and so we knew people. For example, I had been in the office there for 12 years, media guy. So I knew people who wanted to hear the good things about the ACA, but he wouldn't let us go out and get those people and get interviews for his people initially. And I think it was him being just a little overcautious. And so all we could hear was all the bad things. It was the worst thing since, sliced bread, and it was just all these criticism. And the fact that we knew, I had a boss, one of my regional directors was outside a TV station. I'm sorry, it was a newspaper station called La Gaceta. It was a Hispanic paper right outside of Tampa. And they were aching to interview her to hear about the good things, the positive of the ACA, but they wouldn't let her go in and talk. And so that was one of the things that was a problematic. Now, later on, they loosened up and we had great stuff going on with them. And of course, I've already talked about Trump. My issue, honestly, with the Biden
Hold
administration.
on. Before you go to Biden, we got a
Sure,
question. How did you
sure.
manage the site issues? The site issues when that happened.
The which issues? Say that
The
again.
site, the site issues with with the HCA.
Oh, the psychological issues of that. When you say the
No, the
site
site,
issue.
the website, the
Oh,
marketplace.
oh yeah. It was so. We're getting all this criticism every day, and people want help. They're calling to get help, but because we were kind of on lockdown, so we couldn't really help them. And so they're complaining about not getting help. And initially, the site kept crashing, 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 because all these people, you think about the fact that, and particularly a lot of poor and black and brown people had never had health insurance before. And then you had the, the poor white people who would vote against their own best interest, because
Right.
as opposed to lining up with poor people and black people to get something that they should have had. So it was really a tough time, because we felt like our hands were tied, and we had some answers, but we couldn't use and implement the answers they had. So it was a real frustrating time for the first several months, until I think part of it, I think too, is the fact that he was real new. He had been a senator like for 2 years, and he
Hmm.
had surrounded himself with all these highly educated people. And then in the end, they did a fantastic job. But I think he just was a little overcautious initially.
Okay. And so now you go to the Biden administration,
So the
the
Biden
actual
administration,
current administration.
the current administration, I think he went in, he had built bridges his whole career. So he was able to work across the aisles. I think it took him too long to realize that the MAGA group was a whole nother animal. Wasn't going to be no
Hmm.
working across the aisle. And so, whereas, how they kept Obama from, I wish this another thing. I wish he'd have pushed harder, because they wouldn't let him select a Supreme Court judge. Remember,
Okay.
they said, "Oh, it's too close to the end. We need to wait on the election." And I wish he would have ramrodded it through, because now, our children are going to be dealing with those conservative judges for the next 30 years, because he got three of the young ones. And so I think the one place that he could have been more forceful would be selecting federal judges. And but hell, he rescued the dot-com industry, the auto industry, the banking industry. So I mean, he did a whole lot. But Biden, he I think he trusted Netanyahu too much, because
Hmm.
when you look at Israel and Gaza, I mean, what Hamas did was heinous. But you talking about
Right.
killing, you know, maybe killing 5,000 people versus killing 50,000 people, and so many are innocent. And I think that's what's going to be something that Kamala's going to have to deal with, particularly in Michigan, right now. And because young people who are coming out to vote in droves, but they have an issue with how this administration handled Palestine and that conflict. So I
Right.
think he just took too long to realize that what he had done in the past just wasn't going to work with these MAGA Republicans.
Okay. So I guess we can go. You said you're out. You did 2 years with them. Now you're out. Now the current state of the future line right now. So what do you see if what do you see happen if Trump is reelected or VP Harris gets the nod? What do you see for both, like America going forward? What may happen?
Well, I mean, Trump has already told us a lot of stuff that, I mean, Project 2025, even though he isn't going to claim it, his
Right.
people, his staff people wrote that, things like every federal employee will have to sign a letter of loyalty, not to the Constitution, to the flag, but to him.
To
So
him.
he's going to only have loyalists. See, the only thing that to me saved our democracy last time, those generals said, hell to the no, we're not going to allow this. But
Right.
he won't have any of those people in there now. I mean, he's talking about a tariff that is going to raise the prices of everything. He's so much because we get so much from China. He's talking about 20% tariff. Well, that always gets passed on to the consumer. The Wharton
Mhm.
School of Business, where they say he graduated from, it's a little questionable to me.
Allegedly,
Yeah,
allegedly.
allegedly. So they said his plan will cost America $8.1 trillion, and hers, they said, will be 1.8 trillion. They said her plan is much better than his. So he's supposed to be this great businessman. And so every main economist is saying that it's just not a good deal. He's already told you he's going to round up every, I guess, undocumented immigrant and send them back on
Undocumented.
day one. Well, you know what? Who's going to pick the fruit in our fields? Who's going to do all the things that most of us are not willing to do anymore?
Right.
Our economy would collapse if he actually did that. So he's, you know,
I mean, but not to cut you off, but when I hear you say undocumented legal, I kind of look at myself in the mirror as well, because it's like, we were stolen goods, and
absolutely,
so,
absolutely.
so you got to look at it in the same way. And with you saying there's certain jobs that people want to do, those individuals that's coming from these states, I mean, from these areas to say, hey, I'll do it
That's right.
for whatever, but I'm just sending the money back home and getting somebody else over here.
Absolutely, and that's what they're doing. They're saving it up to send back home, and they don't get any benefits, but they pay taxes.
Right.
So I'm saying they're a real important part of our fabric. And so, but to me, he demonizes the other. If they're
Right.
not white men, there's something wrong with them, and he's puts them all in different categories, but none of them are good. The other day, I don't know if you heard him 2 nights ago, he's talking about how beautiful his white skin was. And remember when he was talking about we need more immigrants from Norway and
Mhm.
Scandinavia. He called the African nations S-hole nations.
Right.
Everything, nothing is good, but him. And so I don't know. There's never been a president in my lifetime that demonized so many different communities. This is a melting pot. That's who America is.
Right.
And so to see that I agree. When you hear him do this whole other thing, this whole divisive thing, it's really problematic for me and for a lot of people. It's very and look at how he demonizes women. Hey, he's telling women that you know what he say. Well, if for abortion, and I'm not a poor pro-abortion person, but you know what?
Right.
It took me a while to come to the grips of okay, I don't. I'm not somebody who wants to see abortion, but neither do I want to see a bunch of old men, usually a bunch of old white men, determining what women can do with their bodies.
Correct.
Because, is that better? I don't think it is.
No, because you put another problem in, and there's a problem that's already. So now you're having babies that you really don't want. So now you have to put this baby in a system.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another problem that you're going to say is too many babies in this system, regardless of you white, black, whatever color you is.
That's right.
But my thing is, I think like when you think about it, older white men talking about this now. If we take this back to slavery times and reverse it, black men
Absolutely.
stop getting they daughters pregnant. You'll
That's
definitely abolish what you're trying to do and say no. We're going back to abortion.
Absolutely. And guess what? And we care about the baby in the womb, but we don't care about them once they get here, right? We
Correct.
don't care about them, but yeah, it's all about the unborn child. So to me, that's very hypocritical. And how many of them have paid for abortions? Quite honestly, you look at our guy Herschel Walker down here in Georgia that was
Oh,
running. But 3, 4 women said that he paid for their abortion. So there's a lot of hypocrisy there.
right. It is, but yeah, like you said, a hypocrisy because this baby's born and these two individuals or one individual can't take care of this person. Now they're living off a system that
Yeah,
you really don't want around.
that's right. That's right.
So,
And people have to pay for that system, even if it's flawed, but somebody has to pay for it.
yeah, it's flawed. But again, we can go back a few statements ago. I mean, ain't none of us from here but the
That's
original
right.
Native
That's right.
Americans.
That's right.
So we're not from here. So when you saying your skin and this, and I want this blue-eyed and blonde-haired guy here, gotta remember you're not from here neither, brother, as well.
Look at his wife. Look at his wife, right? She's an immigrant. His
Right,
his son-in-law Jared's father was brought here on an immigration status and by somebody at that church in Pittsburgh where some of the people that he urged to go in and slaughter. Because
right.
I'm not saying he's told them to go do it, but I'm saying the climate, the hatred and the climate that he um, exacerbated, that he promoted, got all these young radical people.
Mhm.
Because one thing that his FBI director said, he said the biggest terrorist threat right now in America is these angry young white men,
Right.
and that's who committed, from the Buffalo slaughter to the school in El Paso to just kind of on and on. These are
Mhm.
angry young white men.
Correct. Okay. So Vice President Harris. Now you let's speak on her. What
Okay.
happens if she wins?
So I believe this about, and again, I don't agree with all of her stuff. I got some issues with some of them, but I don't have any doubt that she loves this country. She
Okay.
is the epitome of the American dream, for immigrant parents that she worked hard and worked her way up. So I think that you know, one of the things that's a real misnomer, and people talk about our economy, and I think the reason they talk about it because things do still cost too much, way too much, and some of that, to be honest, is we're still climbing back from Trump's mismanagement of the economy because he wants to brag about the jobs. Obama created so many more jobs than he did, and because of his COVID denialism and his mismanagement of it, um, but Biden's created a lot more jobs than he has. But some of the things that the administration has done that I think are really important and I'm proud of. So during COVID, in particular, a lot of those kids, the poor kids, the inner city kids, the best meal they were getting was in school.
Right.
So what they did is they tripled the child tax credit. And so in so doing, they reduced child hunger by 47%. That's never happened in this country before. If a kid is hungry, they're going to act up. They're not going
Mhm.
to learn, so that's one of the things that's really important. I don't know how it is where you are, but here in Metro Atlanta, they're building bridges and expanding highways everywhere you go. That's the infrastructure bill that It's something that lots of presidents have been saying we're going to put money in infrastructure, but they actually did it. The chips bill, which is designed to, because everything runs on a chip now, all our automobiles, et cetera, that
Mhm.
to bring that back from overseas to where we're making our own stuff. So those are some of the things. They just 200 billion dollars to the black farmers. They just
Mhm.
pushed that through because a lot of those people had their land stolen and they never could get loans and support. So those are some important things. I think that she will continue to build on a lot of the good things that were done, and I think she will be a lot more sensitive and take a very different approach to Palestine and Israel. Because I think that honestly, now that initially he gave Netanyahu the kind of the green light to go do whatever. Listen, I'm pro-Israel. I love Israel, and I believe that we should support Israel. But even his own people don't like what he's doing because he don't care about the hostages anymore. He just wants to wipe out Hamas and the terrorists. But guess
Right.
what? You're never gonna get rid of them
Right.
because you creating a bunch of more enemies when they see that you've killed their parents and their uncles and all that. So that's what I think that she will bring a certain sensitivity and a certain compassion. Hell, it's been 250 years. We never had a woman president. I think that there's something, a lot of the best leaders I know are women. And
Okay.
I think it's high time that somebody that is a woman, she clearly, and she's talking about bringing the country together. She even says, I'm not going to go hunting my enemies from day one. I'm not going to have an enemies list. She said, I'm going to have a to do list. And she said, I'll make sure we have some Republicans at the table with us, making decisions with us and challenging us when they think we're wrong. Because
Right.
that's one of the big problems I had with his administration. If you were pro, I mean, you were, yeah, pro life, anti abortion, then he hired people who, though, were very unqualified for the roles that they had. But as long as they had that certain mindset, he brought them around. And I don't think that she would do that. And the reason that I say that I'm encouraged by that, is you look at all the moderate normal, well, I say mainstream Republicans, I should,
Mhm.
mainstream Republicans that she is that have signed on and are now supporting her because they know that she's doing well, that the former president did a real disservice to the Republican Party. And I think that if they don't do some things different, they're going to be defunct. They'll be irrelevant, for the next 20 years.
Well, just like you just said, putting people in place. I'm from Baltimore, putting Dr. Ben Carson as the director of
Yeah,
housing. He's doing
exactly.
nothing
What the
about that.
hell? Nothing about now. If he was the Surgeon General or he was
Right.
Director of Health and Human Services, that made it Amarosa. Amarosa, they sent her to the black journalist. You remember in Chicago this year, he was talking
Hmm.
about black jobs and all this other stuff. They sent her to the National Association of Black Journalists conference in Dallas that year, and they laughed her off the stage because don't come with all this nonsense. I mean, respect me and I'll respect you, but don't piss on me and tell me it's raining. Come on now.
Yeah, you hiring your friends is one thing, but putting your friends that don't even have like any experience in it. I mean, lower level job, fine, but this man's a surgeon, gifted hands, his book, and you got him as
Exactly.
a director of housing. He don't
Yeah.
know nothing about urban, HUD, none of that.
And look, Kennedy, what's he gonna do with Kennedy, right? Put him over Health and Human Services. He's already a vaccine denier. He wants to take chlorine out of the water. I mean, he has no background in Health and Human Services. Elon Musk, if you told me he was going to make him the Secretary of the Treasury, okay, that makes sense. But you go, let's put people where they have a track record and have some training. And he's already said that, look what he'll do to the CDC. The CDC under him couldn't be honest about what was going on with COVID. And I think that also cost several 100,000 people lives because he was muffling them. And it's only going to get worse. One thing about him, he tells you what he's going to do, and I believe if he's able to do it, he will do it.
Mm, wow. So, your book that you have, you know, why did being a black government official make you see your job differently in his administration?
Number one, because um, now Nixon and even Clinton, I think talked about the super predator for black folk, right? That whole term
Mm-hmm.
of black criminals and the super predator, but
Was
it
94
has been
crime bill.
yeah, yeah, exactly, through the crime bill. And so, and now that has kind of come back to haunt him in later years, but no recent president has been so divisive and so uh scarring of these populations that make up America. This is a melting pot, and there's something wrong with everybody but white men. And so, for us being an all black office, the only one, we saw ourselves in all of these people that he was demonized. He used to, what Elijah, your congressman that
Come, Elijah
started?
Cummings.
It was
Elijah
like, yeah,
Cummings.
remember how he talked about Baltimore, right?
Oh yeah, about the rats on West Baltimore.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So any city, Chicago, Atlanta, and John Lewis, any big black city, San Francisco, they were, so that
Detroit.
made it personal for me. And then the way he sought to destroy and demean the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, which we had spent 4 years building. So like so we had 8 states. Only one of them said we'll expand Medicaid, which was designed all 50 would, and that was Kentucky. Kentucky basically said, "Look, we need help. We know we need help. Yeah, come on in here," and so all the other states fought the implementation of the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. So what happened with those? Instead of having a state-based marketplace where you work along with the governor and everybody to put it in, we had to go in as federal employees and do all the work, build the coalitions, find partners, most of who weren't getting paid, like in Mississippi, for example, the Children's Defense Fund and Mississippi Health Advocacy Program. These people who they knew their people needed health insurance and they needed help, and they knew their governor wasn't going to do anything to help. In fact, they were going to resist. So we had to build those coalitions and partnerships, and they kept trying to overturn, replace, and repeal. Even my regional director, the lady, the congresswoman, former congresswoman out of North Carolina, she said, "Hey, we had 6 years to replace and repeal. We didn't do it. So now we should go help the people." And I had an experience that you'll appreciate. So we kept waiting. They're always throwing hand grenades, talking about it's the worst thing, the ACA. But they hadn't told us what our role was going to be. Every year previously, the 4 years, we would go out and spend time. I spent time in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, all the states supporting. Like, for example, in the beginning of the year, you go out just before the open season was going to start, and you'd have to tell people what changed, like what are the you had to make $11,700, less than that to qualify. Where could you get your help? How many plans were available? And so these partners would
Yeah,
set up
open
these.
season right now.
Yeah, these partners would set up, like in Mississippi. I'd start right outside of Memphis, and they would coordinate the tour, and we'd have like 6 cities. We go from the
Mm-hmm.
just out there all the way down to the Gulf Coast to Biloxi or Gulfport, and they'd have these things set up everywhere, and so it helped validate for them. The Affordable Care Act, and it drew a lot of publicity, and so it was a good thing. And then finally, though, in 2017, like 3 weeks before open enrollment, they tell us, well, you're basically not going to be out working with the people supporting the Affordable Care Act. So these people in Mississippi who were expecting me, and then so went and talked to my boss. He goes, "Yeah, we got to tell them we can't come." So I went home, prayed about it, wrote this letter, went back, showed it to her. The next one, she said, "Send it." So the people in Mississippi called me up and they said, "What do you mean you're not coming this year?" And so I very carefully said, "Well, we've been told we're not going to be in support." So 2 days later, I get this newsletter from Mississippi and it says, HHS abandons Mississippians. So I know the people in DC are going to hear this. So I go talk to my boss and we send it to them before they hear it somewhere else. And then they immediately get us on the phone and they rip both of us a new one. They say to me, "Well, what made you felt like you needed to tell them you weren't coming?" So there
Mm,
was a black lady that's a personnel lady who had been there through several administrations. So I'm sitting there fuming, but of course I can't be the angry black man, right? So I had to calmly say to her, "Well, what would you have preferred? We just didn't show up?" And then she says, "Well, okay, you go home tonight and you write a rationale and you send it to this person, this person, this person about why you felt like you needed, why it's important for us to be in Mississippi in these places." And so I did that and they said thank you. And that was it. They also told me I'm going to have ASPA, which is our public affairs people in DC. They're going
mm-hmm,
to write an apology that you have to then send to the people of Mississippi. Well, guess what? I'm still waiting on that apology to Rod. But then the
mm.
people over in Mississippi who I was supposed to work with, 3 days later, they're on MSNBC. My email is up on the screen, and the guy is saying that HHS was sabotaging the Affordable Care Act. So ever since there, I'm the black sheep, and I'm under the gun, and our whole office was from then on out. Because then they started calling
Oh,
around and
wow.
seeing it wasn't just our office, it was offices all over the country.
Okay. So my question is this. I know this been going on for a while as far as like the water in Michigan, the water in Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Is anybody ever going to think about fixing that?
Now I really don't have an excuse for Michigan. I know the reason in Mississippi, to be perfectly honest, Mississippi's the blackest state in the country.
Right.
And there still has the deepest vestiges of slavery. There's this one county in Mississippi where 98% of the people live there are all descendants of slaves. And I
Slaves.
think I took my boss and I went to, it was his first time going to Jackson, and he couldn't believe that that was a capital city. So you can go 10 miles outside of Jackson and you have this beautiful, pristine, high, uh, very expensive neighborhoods, and they don't have no issues with water. So it's a very intentional thing, in my opinion, to keep that black city and that black state struggling to even have decent water.
She said there's a FEMA audit
Yep.
on that.
Yep.
Well, one more before we get out of here. So, not going to ask you that because that's this is the last thing I'm going to say. You said since he was sworn to repeal and replace, as a businessman that you say that you are, not you, but you say that you are. I think more pissing me off more would be making it better, not getting rid of it. Like if I
Right.
can find the
Right.
holes that you couldn't figure
Yeah.
and say,
Yeah.
hey, let's make this better because it's
Yeah.
already in place, I'll make
Exactly.
you mad even more because I got it right. Instead of just
That's
tearing
right.
the whole thing down.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, so they didn't want to, and even Obama admitted, listen, there's a lot we can improve upon that, but let's not try to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So today, like there are 23 million people that are on the Affordable Care Act and some 40 million that benefit from it. So what they did though was what the Trump administration did. They cut down the funding for promotions like by three-fourths. They reduced the funding for the navigators, and that's the people that see the real people. Somebody like you, somebody educated, computer literate, you're not gonna have any problem signing up. But the poor people, the uneducated people, the people who look at all that paperwork, they're overwhelmed by it. Those are the people who really needed the help. And so you're taking that from those people, again,
Mm-hmm.
particularly these southern recalcitrant governors who, like here in Georgia, Governor Kemp brags about having a $10 billion surplus. But
Right.
hell, that's because you won't give people working poor who park cars, do hair, working two or three jobs, and they can't afford health care and somewhere to live too. So you balancing the budget on those people, but you take them out of the system, your economy collapses. But you don't brag about having $10 billion, and that's what these conservative governors do all too often. And you're right. If we just fix it and make it better, so the other things they would do, like in a state like Mississippi, where maybe you had four different carriers, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Kaiser, you cut it down to one or two. So you cut the choices, which they call make a narrow network. And
Mm-hmm.
so now at the point though, it's kind of like when Medicare started. People used to say how bad it was, and now people we couldn't live without Medicare. And so now you can't give somebody something and then take it away. And so people are real fiercely defendant of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare now. And so you're right, the job is now to make it better. So what Biden did, he reinforced he put the money all back in that Trump took away, trying to kill it. And so I think that Kamala would continue that because do you think about all these people who never had health care before, never had health insurance before, and it still can be better. And let's work together to make it better.
Right, because when you get your 4 years or 8 years, if you reelected, what are you known for?
That's right. That's
And
right.
that's what it comes down to. Like, what is your legacy?
That's right. That's right.
So and I always joke with people all the time, and it's just like I talk about back in the day with what having SSI, and you can't take their money if you sue them. I'm on SSI, you can't take it. So I'm like, that is great because you're allowing a person to still live. You know, um, you got to look at it like like Lyndon B. Johnson and
Yeah.
Obama, and what was their legacy? What is your
Hmm.
legacy when it's all said and done? And when
Hmm.
I look at it,
Hmm.
it's like you had an opportunity to create a legacy by just going ahead and just making everything better instead of letting your ego take over.
Exactly. So his legacy is he cost us several hundred thousand lives in COVID for one reason, and for one thing, I think because hell, you just took so long to it's just going to disappear and getting people to put bleach in their arms and all this crazy stuff. When we needed a Churchill, we had a Trump.
Right. I mean, that's what happens. So that's just how I look at it when you go to 1600, Pennsylvania Avenue. What
Yeah,
is your legacy when
that's
you
right.
leave? You
That's
know,
right.
like you said, I guess your legacy would be, putting us in debt and putting bleach in your mouth and doing all other type stuff. But I guess his legacy probably is you're probably in my lifetime, you're probably the most you don't think you just say what you're gonna say. So I'm like, you don't hold your tongue. So I'll probably say that's probably your legacy. Like I'm just gonna say what I feel this morning.
And it's amazing how many people are drawn to that. But yeah, that is his legacy, and plus his 34 felony convictions, and the fact that he would have had a whole lot more had he not been able to control the courts and not go to court for the things that he was accused of.
Right. So again, so last question. What do you think happens after this is over? Like the outcome of each person, what happens with these radicals, with just the general public? What happens if she wins? Will there be another January 6th? Because I've seen DC's already preparing for that. They already boarded up some buildings. If she wins, does that happen? If he wins, uh, well, people, I don't even know what people will do if he wins.
Well, that's a great question. I think that there are a lot of concerns about if he wins. I think he will empower his people to do some of the things that they did before because that's when the most like when Obama was elected, the most weapons bought in history was in his administration, and that was the white backlash to this first black president.
Right.
And you think about all the hate crimes went up massively, and just like with Elon Musk bought Twitter, the racist comments on and the threats on Twitter quadruple. So I think that we're going to be in for some rough time either way. He has all these people, all these lawyers that were a lot better than the lawyers he used last time. Like at least 12 states have passed laws where they can challenge the election for any reason.
Mhm.
So there's going to be a real foot dragging. I don't think you're going to find, the violence if she wins. Well, you will find that there will be some violence, but I'm saying there won't be violence perpetrated by that side, but there will be some pushback and some kickback, probably either way, whether he wins or loses. If he wins, he's going to empower and enable his people to do some of the things that because it's this white backlash in 2042. Roughly, this is going to become a minority majority nation, and there's a fear there. This is like all these young white men who feel like, you know something's being taken from them. My old boss used to say this, right? He used to say, when white America gets a cold, black America gets pneumonia. So we've been used to being uncomfortable our whole lives. But now
Mhm.
you have these privileged young white men who find themselves in positions that they never have been, and they don't know how to act.
Correct. Well, thank you for joining us tonight.
This has been great.
Yeah, definitely. So, if anybody's looking for you, there's a website on the
Yep.
screen.
Come check me out. Yep. See my background, my books. You're looking for a speaker, all that stuff. Just check me out. Appreciate you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for coming on here and talking about the possibilities, what may happen. Of course, some older possibilities that you've been through. For the
Yeah.
5 administrations you've been through. So, I guess I should say, people, I'll see you tomorrow for the season finale, episode 31, with actors and actresses from General Hospital, one of the longest running soap operas in the world. I might gotta get my grandmother to stay up a little late tomorrow to watch this. So tomorrow, 8 p.m. Thank you for coming, Derek.
All right.
Everybody, I hope everybody voted, because you can't complain if you didn't do
That's
your
right.
part.
That's right.
So
You
just
don't
just
vote, you don't count.
right. Yeah, you don't vote, you don't count. So that's the crazy thing. Well, he wasn't convicted because they actually let Diddy vote from jail today. I've seen, but he
Did
wasn't
they?
convicted.
Did
So
they?
yeah, I've seen
Oh, wow.
it. So that's
Wow.
another thing right there to
It is.
stir up.
I didn't
So
know that.
I'll see you people tomorrow, 8 p.m. with the cast of General Hospital tomorrow. Thank you for joining tonight.
Thank you, Rod. Have a
You're
good one.
welcome.